Thank you everyone for joining us today. Welcome to part 3 of our DevOps series discussing SAFe's continuous delivery pipeline. I'm Dalen Walton. I'm an Agile Engagement Manager here at Icon Agility Services, and we're excited to have all of you join us today. Today we'll be hearing from Dan James and Mark Ricks. They discuss the SAFe's continuous delivery pipeline, specifically the continuous deployment practice domains. In the 2 previous webinars, we discussed the exploration and integration practice domains, and the next one we'll be discussing the last one, which is release on demand on June 8th. So I'll tell you a little bit about what we're going to do today. I'm going to tell you a little bit about Icon. I'm going to introduce our panelists, and then we're going to have about 30 minutes of presentation followed by a 15-minute Q&A. Please use your Q&A function to add your questions as we go, and please try to add some specificity and context so we can ask them all at the end and under the right section that we've been discussing. This session is being recorded today, and we will make the recording available to everyone that's registered. I'll also paste the URL for the previous recordings of the 2 previous webinars in the chat room, so you can look at those whenever you'd like. Obviously, we highly encourage you to attend all the sessions to get the most out of this, and we'll move on to a little bit about Icon. So at a high level, Icon has been in the lean agile transformation business for quite a number of years. We have a large number of SBCTs and SAFe fellows on staff. Our expertise is end-to-end SAFe transformations. We've done so for over 100 companies. We've trained over 13,000 people. We are contributors to the SAFe framework. We specialize in areas around DevOps, tooling, lean portfolio management, and executive coaching and training. Moving on. So why should you care what these 2 people have to say? Well, Mark wrote it, like literally he wrote it. So Mark is responsible as the lead author behind the SAFe DevOps class and a co-author of the SAFe architecture class. So he knows a little bit about what he's talking about. Dan has been spearheading, I think he's almost on his 20th end-to-end transformation now. So he brings a wealth of practical knowledge of real life stories of how these different practice domains get put into practice and the value that you can create inside an organization as you move around this entire continuous delivery pipeline. With that, I'll turn it over to our 2 experts, and we're looking forward to the discussion. Thank you.
Take it away, Mark.
Thanks, Dan. Thanks, Dalen. Yeah, I might have written it, but I learned a lot from Dan. We've been working together for several years now, and yeah, it was really our joint experiences out in the field that led to this course and this the initial set of this body of knowledge. So it's great to be back with you, Dan. This is episode 3 of 4. We had a lot of fun going through continuous exploration and continuous integration, kind of walking through those levels and talking a lot about the conveyor belt idea last time, where in continuous integration, we focus on automation, and that's really where we start to get a lot of acceleration, built-in quality, and we're shifting left all over the place into that continuous integration domain. And that brought into view several of those practice domains, those gray rings on the inner circle on the meta model on the right. So I guess as an intro to this segment, continuous deployment, let's kind of recap where we left off with continuous integration. Where are we now? We're sort of, we've run most of the gauntlet. We've explored the problem space. We understand our customers' needs. We've gone through continuous integration, and we've developed and built and tested and now staged our solutions. So we have pretty high confidence that we've built the right thing, and that we've built the right thing right. And we have the metrics and the measurements and the acceptance from our stakeholders and customers to support that. And now we're ready to deploy. So that's what we're here to talk about now.
Yeah, so if we have done our job right, we have shifted left the discipline of initial quality, built-in quality in the previous quadrants, then the act of going from staging to deploy should be a pretty good yawn. It should be a non-event. It should be low risk and low trauma, and shouldn't require late nights and weekends and heroic efforts to get done. That's a great theory, but we need to talk about how we do that. And so we talked about built-in quality and ensuring that we have tested, including security, compliance, and functional quality, and all those things. Now we're able to see in a production environment the fruits of our labor, and how confident are we? And the first question I would ask as a coach that Mark, perhaps you can help us, answer, is how painful is it to promote a code change to production?
Right. It all comes down to that. So that's the big question. And that's a leading indicator of success or failure at this point. How painful is that deployment process? And this is one of your smells, right, Dan? Mm-hmm. Not one of your personal smells, but one of the things that you look for in the process to indicate whether we're on the right track or not, right? How painful is that deployment process? If it's taking all weekend, if it's a slog, we've all been on those bridge calls with multiple teams, right? Dozens of people trying to get that code over the line, and something breaks and we've got to unwind everything, right? So we want to go from that kind of a condition to being able to deploy whenever we want to, and it should be a non-event, right? It should be a big yawner. So we want to be able to continuously deploy to a production environment. So one of the fundamental tenets of DevOps in SAFe is going to come into focus here, which is the separation of deployment from release. So when we deploy here, we're not saying that we're live to end users. We're just deployed to a legitimate production environment, right? We have production behavior, production systems, production data. We could go live if we wanted to, but usually we're hidden at this point through a dark release, using feature toggles or some other mechanism, maybe a blue-green deployment strategy. But the idea here is to continuously be able to deploy to a production environment so that we can release on demand. And in order to do that, we should be working in very, very tiny batches and deploying to this production environment potentially multiple times per day. If you're a web scale company, maybe you're doing this thousands or hundreds of thousands of times per day, but it doesn't have to be that frequent. The idea is that we should take all of the drama out of deploying to a production environment. And we've enabled that through the activities that we talked about in episodes 1 and 2.
Yeah, and a lot of companies, if they don't have those disciplines that we talked about in the first two quadrants, they'll utilize a hardening phase, a hardening period, before going here. Especially if they're not decoupled from release, they'll go into a hardening phase, say back in staging or in a QA environment. And they'll spend quite a bit of time there because they've had past pain in releasing or many problems each time they released. And so they feel the need to harden. If we have built our quality in, then there's really nothing that we should worry about hardening at this point. But if their bug counts are really large and there's a lot of pain in releasing, many companies do this, including the company that we prototyped the original content of this material at a long, like 6-month hardening period, So if you're in your organization having to use a hardening period before you can deploy to production, there's a pathway to get that fixed. And the first step is stop what you're doing and add some automated tests during the development phase and focus on that continuous integration. Number 2, ensure that your releasable features are as tiny as possible to reduce risk. It simplifies testing, gives you more frequent feedback so that you have a better product going into this next step. Number 3, make sure that your development teams are practicing test first, allowing the code to be designed by the tests rather than the other way around and making tests an afterthought. And number 4, make sure you understand a definition of done. Have a good done state that everybody understands and that takes you as close as possible to deployment at the end of every sprint, every iteration. And that helps you weed out those hard to find bugs as early as possible in the process and gives you the frequent feedback that you need. The bottom line is no functional defects should have been allowed to reach this step in the pipeline. If it's true that no defects have made it here, no known functional defects have made it here, then you have a low risk process to go into deploy.
Right, great advice. So a lot of the things that you mentioned there are components of those practice domains, those gray rings in the center of this diagram. So great way to kind of recap the deployment step here and bring into focus the DevOps practices, the mindset, some of the checkpoints and the tooling that are going to be pulled into this deployment step as we talk about that practice domain stack that's over there on the right-hand side of the slide, right? So think about how your deployment pipeline is operating at this point, right? The automation that's in that pipeline, your automated deployment tools are coming into focus. From a configuration management standpoint, how much of your deployment is automated and where are those scripts, where are those configurations? Well, they should be in version control along with all of your other assets, right? So that's where we intersect that next practice domain, version control. And then you spoke about a few elements of continuous security and continuous quality, right? If we see vulnerabilities here, we're going to stop, we're going to roll back, we're not going to push forward and pray and hope for the best in production, right? Or deal with cleaning up issues later in a warranty period or some kind of a triage period after we go live. We're going to stop the line and go back. And then maybe quickly to recap put a final fork in this deployment step from a value stream management perspective. We have to make sure that the definition of done here is very well understood, right? What does it mean to be deployed and ready to potentially go live to our end users? So managing that value stream and managing the value proposition of what we've deployed at this step is very important. So Dan, anything else to add on deploy before we move on to verify?
No, I think we can move on to verify here because again, we have reached this point because we reduced the risk or eliminated our risk through better practices upstream, and so now we should be able to move forward with some confidence. But we're not done verifying, and that's what the next step is.
Right. So we have to remember where we are in the cycle here, right? Even though we're deployed, it doesn't mean that we're necessarily live to end users. So these next three activities in the continuous delivery pipeline are really part of our overall release level definition of done, right? Before we release, before we go live to end users, we want to make sure that we've verified that deployment. Do we have the functionality for real that we need to have in a production environment? Maybe this is the first time that we've actually deployed to a legitimate production environment. So let's do some final checks there to verify. We also want to make sure that we have the right monitoring and response capabilities in place before we throw that switch and go live to end users. So we'll get to monitor and respond here in a minute. But with verify, yeah, this is, let's test as much as we need to test that deployment in this environment before we proceed. That could be a little bit, it could be a lot. It could be as simple as a smoke test. Or it could be as involved as running a complete battery of integration tests and end-to-end tests, on the order of what Netflix does. So there's a spectrum in there, but the point is we're verifying that deployment. We're making sure that it behaves as expected in that production environment so that when we release, we're in good shape. We know that the value is there.
Yeah, so do we have everything we need to release? We need to be able to answer that question. From both the functional and non-functional perspectives. We may be able to do some penetration testing here, although as soon as we have been able to run tests at this level, we may want to ask, can we move those tests upstream and have done them sooner? In some cases, you need a legitimate contiguous production environment, identical to a release environment in order to do some tests. So that those tests are valid. But some tests could be moved upstream so that when we get here, there's even less to do. And is everything that we do during this step, is it automated or can it be automated? That's another question we may want to ask. Shifting left further and automating whatever it is we have to do here can help speed up our time to market. And that would include any test data or transactional data. If that's, if you have to roll back or roll forward multiple times to get past the verify stage here, you need to make sure that you're managing your transactional data and not losing anything in the process. So that's something, and of course everything needs to be in version control by now. So those are some of the things that I in my notes as a coach that I ask.
Yeah, and so if we look at this through the lens of those practice domains that are again over there on the right hand side of the slide, that's sort of the layers of the cake that get sliced out as we go from that verify marker or rectangle, that little green guy out on the edge of the circle, and sort of cut in toward the center. So yeah, again, a lot of those practices, a lot of those tools come from within those practice domains. The first of which is deployment pipeline. So this is the same stack we saw for deploy, right? Same practice domains come into focus, and we're still on that conveyor belt at this point. We're still in the deployment pipeline. So Dan, the tests that you spoke about and the automation that's activating those tests should be coming from that deployment pipeline, right? Yep. And that deployment pipeline is oftentimes automated from the moment of code check-in to validated in production. So we could be at the end of that operation, at the end of that button click that runs all of these activities in one fell swoop through that automated pipeline. So the deployment pipeline is going to be active here, doing that final verification to make sure that we are deployed and we are good in production. And also from a configuration management perspective, you hit the nail on the head by saying that, what if something goes wrong here in Verify? We have to be ready for some of these verification tests to fail. If that happens, what are we going to do? Well, we want to be able to roll back quickly. We want to be able to fix forward quickly. And the more we have scripts and automation of the entire stack in place to do that, the more quickly we'll be able to recover from those issues and get back on track. So configuration management is the domain that houses those kinds of capabilities. Again, version control, right? We can't stress the importance of, or overstress the importance of version control in DevOps. Notice that ring goes all the way around the circle, almost. So version control comes into play throughout most of the continuous delivery pipeline because we're storing assets in there. We're pushing and pulling from that version control system when we need to on demand so that we can set up and tear down not only the applications, but the full stack when we need to. And then of course, continuous security, continuous quality, right? We're still checking for quality here. This is another quality step. And in our model, in DevOps, in the continuous delivery pipeline, testing is not a phase. It's done continuously throughout. So we're going to do more testing here. And then again, this validation should be part of our definition of done as a matter of managing that value stream and ensuring that we have fast flow and high value running through that pipeline.
Yeah, and a question that comes up periodically is we talk about the deployment pipeline and notice that it comes to an end at the end of the verify step. I've been asked multiple times, why do we stop it there? Doesn't the pipeline continue beyond that? And my answer is that everything that we have done up to this point is a technical decision. Everything that we do after this point is a business decision. When we go to release, that's a business decision. But we can be accumulating new value in a production environment all we want, 24/7, and that is a technical process. But when do we release? When there's sufficient new customer value that the business deems it appropriate to release. And that's why our deployment pipeline is shown to come to an end here. From this point, a decision needs to be made. Do we have enough new business value to proceed? And we'll cover that part in the next webinar.
Great. So that's Verify.
Yeah, let's go on to Monitor. So how are we connecting the dots from this release back to our original hypothesis and architect and develop and test steps earlier in the pipeline? That's the question that we need to answer here.
Right. We want to prove it, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Again, this is this is a continuous learning loop that we're enabling here. There's a reason why this diagram is a circle. There's a reason why we've kind of looped it around itself and we put the customer right there at the top. We're starting with that customer need. We're building something that we know is, or that we think is aligned to our customers' needs. And we're going to build, measure, and learn our way to success, right? But everything starts with a hypothesis. So there's a lot that we don't know that we don't know. There may be a lot that we know that we don't know, but we're going to go do this anyway. We're going to build something and we're going to deploy it, and then we're going to measure the value there. And at the end of the cycle, if that value is not there, if we got the hypothesis wrong, then we're going to pivot to something else. So we have to be able to make those decisions. In order to make those evidence-based decisions, economic decisions that benefit our customers and our companies the most, we need to be able to measure success. So this is the first real big step we're going to put in place to make sure that we have those monitoring capabilities in place, right? We're going to monitor the full stack from a performance perspective, the app tier all the way down to the data tier and the infrastructure. We're also going to make sure that we are able to monitor the application level, right? And some of the business metrics, those value metrics that we put in place earlier as a definition of the benefit hypothesis. We will see success if we get these results, and there should be business-oriented outcomes. So we should be able to test for those. So again, here in this monitoring step, it's not so much that we're actively doing the monitoring here, because remember, we're deployed but not released. We're just making sure that we have the ability to monitor everything we need to monitor once we go live.
That's right. And we want to be able to be ready to visualize the results of the data that we're capturing. How do we know who is using our feature, our new feature? How do we know where they are when they're using it, or what times of day that they're using it? How are they using it? Are they having problems? Are they getting tied up on a page and can't leave the page? The key is that we cannot improve our product if we don't measure our product. And so, we need to be able to measure. So here is where we're validating that we can measure and that we can easily monitor the results once we have released.
Exactly.
So, if we can't answer the question, how are we connecting the dots, then we're likely not using any telemetry to provide those answers. So, this is, a leading indicator that we may have skipped over some telemetry in our definition of done.
Right. So running down the practice domain stack here on the right, this step is all about continuous monitoring, and continuous monitoring shows up here in the continuous delivery pipeline for the first time. So this is where we really make sure that we have that capability so that we can use that capability on into operations, right? And see how that gray ring stretches all the way into release on demand through release, stabilize, and measure. So this is where we're going to make sure that we have continuous monitoring and observability capabilities built in. And from an infrastructure management perspective, right, let's script it out. If we need infrastructure there, let's script that infrastructure. Let's make sure that we can set up and tear down pieces of our monitoring stack. We can add components when we need to relatively quickly. And we can aggregate that data across multiple domains, multiple systems into a single pane of glass, whatever we need to do to make sure that we're not only collecting the data, but we're able to visualize the data and use it. Again, version control and monitoring here is all about maintaining security and quality in that production setting. And then that value stream management domain is where we're going to reach in to pull those meaningful metrics. What are our leading indicators? What does success look like? What are maybe our pirate metrics and the market indicators that are going to let us know whether we have true value here or not, both from an internal performance perspective and from a business perspective.
That's right. So let's say our monitoring is now set up. We're ready, we believe, to release. We know we're going to be capturing the telemetry. What is our plan if something goes wrong? When we release, something goes wrong. Where do we plan that? Good segue, huh?
Maybe we need to have the ability to respond to
Yes.
issues.
What's our
Masterful segue.
MTTR?
It's almost like you were in radio at one time.
Almost. Yeah, you'd think.
So respond.
Yeah, exactly. Okay, I will respond. The question that coaches want to get answered, are we able to respond to a problem before the customer sees it? That's the key question. Unfortunately, it's sad, but so many companies, when they have a breach, like a security breach, they may not find out for 200 days, and it was reported by customers, not by internal detection or prevention methods. So, we need to know what our response is going to be, and have that response and restoration as absolutely as fast as possible, because the value proposition of our releasable feature diminishes or dies out completely when errors occur in production. We need to know what our response plan. Are we going to roll back? Are we going to fix forward? What are we going to do? Because you cannot inspect quality into your software. You have to have built it in. Now we're responding to those other anomalies that may occur here. So this step is where we are too often punished for not shifting quality upstream.
Right, absolutely. And the ability to respond to production incidents is so crucial to DevOps success, right? And it's because we're preserving value at this point. We've done a lot to shift left and build capabilities in and automate the pipeline and do all of these things as a coordinated unit, a team of teams, right? We're getting the entire organization involved and aligned on enabling DevOps and continuous delivery. That's why we're bringing product managers and product owners and the entire teams and our business owners and stakeholders into the process, our UX people and our designers into the process during continuous exploration, right? It takes a village. We're doing this so that we can deliver value and sustain that value. Well, if we deliver it, but something breaks in production, that value starts to erode very, very quickly. And I think we've all been in those kinds of situations, right? Where we lose the confidence of our stakeholders. Our customers stop using our products because there's an outage or there's some kind of a critical defect, right? So we want to be able to avoid those. Avoid them if we can. If we can't avoid them, we want to be able to restore service as quickly as possible. And MTTR, mean time to restore, mean time to resolve, is a critical metric in DevOps. And a lot of people would say it's the most important thing to measure from a DevOps maturity perspective. So this is where we're going to build that capability in.
Yeah, and if we have a failure, one of the first responses that I advocate is that the first thing we do is write a new test for that particular failure to prevent it from reaching this point again. Write the test, then go find the problem, fix the problem, but leave the test there, so that that problem cannot reoccur in release. Mm-hmm. And are all fixes going to go through the pipeline, or are we just going to still rely on the old school approach of hot fixes that are outside of version control? So this is where everything being in version control is such an important concept. Are we actually rehearsing failures? Do we wait until this point and just say, we're going to throw it out there and see what happens? Kind of like auto manufacturers did in the early days. Just get it out there and we'll fix it with recalls. Or are we actually going to rehearse failures and then make sure that we are resilient before we, put it out there?
Rehearsing failures, that sounds chaotic.
Yeah, it sounds like a chaos monkey to me. Yeah, exactly. No, it's all about managing risk, right? This is our last chance, and we need a response plan before we release in case the proverbial caca hits the fan. We want to be able to respond immediately and make sure that that same problem does not reoccur.
Exactly. So here, critical step, let's make sure that we have the ability to respond to any incident, and even better if we can detect anomalies before they become issues and we can fix them, we can knock them down before anybody even notices. So our ability to be proactive about responding to issues in production, whether they actually cause failures or not, is paramount. And we're going to pull from these practice domains to get that done. Continuous monitoring, we're going to leverage that infrastructure we produced in the last step, and use our infrastructure there. Again, version control, we're going to use that, and manage security and quality through this step, all for the purpose of delivering and sustaining long-term value for our customers. So that's
right.
Respond.
Awesome.
And that's basically our time box.
Yeah, it is. It's
Well, we're
really,
exactly at time box.
yeah.
So far, we just have, if anybody would like to ask questions, please put them in the Q&A. Right now, we have one from Joe Montalbano, who I actually talked to earlier this week. And he writes, I've had good luck improving definition of done with teams over time and iteration boundaries, especially when there is leftover work at the end of the iteration. Do you have any advice or suggestions about how one might be able to accelerate the process of improving your DoD?
Well, there are a few, coaching activities that we recommend. Number one, a lot of folks that don't have a clear definition of done are not practicing behavior-driven development because it's a lot easier to define an acceptance criteria, both at the feature level and down at the story level, when you have written it out in Gherkin, written it out in given, when, then format, where you have both business and technical people involved in the creation of that Gherkin. What it does is it gives you a clear definition of done with the least amount of words, and it's testable. It becomes executable specifications. It makes it a lot easier to go from acceptance criteria to automated tests. It simplifies the process, and you get to reuse the same effort in multiple places. It's both documentation for audit purposes and it's test itself and its documentation. So it's, you can use it in multiple places by only doing it once. So your definition of done needs to require that all functional activity or all behaviors that are being developed are written in Gherkin, written in given, when, then format. And that's behavior-driven development. Make sure the business is involved in that process because they need to be thinking of the behaviors that the customer themselves will experience. So that's one area. The definition of done needs to include some of the operational things that will come later in the pipeline. And when we do a warm handoff, to operations, that needs to be a collaborative effort. So there may be some security items, some compliance items, some operational items that need to be included in the definition of done early in the process. That's where your architect can help represent in the ideation process itself. And it can provide the clarity that you need in your definition of done. You should also have and SAFE does this, it gives you what they would consider to be a minimum definition of done down at the team level all the way up to the release level. Use that as the absolute starting point, the minimum definition of done, and then add within your context other requirements that must be met in order for this thing to progress. And then you have tests written that verify that the definition of done has been met, so that whole process of determining whether we have met our definition of done, can be automated.
What I would add to that is consider instrumenting your definition of done to an extent possible in your pipeline. A lot of times these are operational checkpoints, right? These are process level checks. As part of our definition of done, we want to make sure that our features have demonstrated compliance with our security policies or compliance with our change management policies, right? We're not going to let a feature go into production unless it's gone through the quality control checks or the process checks or the security checks or compliance checks that we want it to. So a lot of times these controls show up in the definition of done as process controls or operational controls. and which means that they do belong in there. But maybe early on they're a little bit heavyweight. So work with the teams and the organization on continually refactoring those, getting them to a point where they're streamlined. So you're using your definition of done as a way to calibrate and streamline your delivery process, moving from, say, heavyweight process controls and phase gates into a more streamlined approach. And the more you can get those controls into your pipeline, the faster things are going to flow. But I really love the idea of revisiting your definition of done every iteration. So work them into your retrospectives. Open up a conversation. If you're a safe shop, bring them into your inspect and adapt sessions, maybe showcase some of the results in system demo, open up a conversation about it. These definitions of done are very important in governing not only the quality, but the speed, the velocity of your pipelines.
Yeah, and if you have many non-functional requirements or new technology that needs to be incorporated in order to support your new feature, you can embed enabler stories within the feature or enabler features within the epic that you are supporting in order to ensure that that enabler work that's so important and critical to being able to release that feature has been accomplished. So if it may require, we need to write some new infrastructure scripts. Well, those scripts can be tested as well. So you can write tests to test the scripts to make sure that they are sound before, and that's basically helping out the operationalization of that, the release of that feature. And so you can use your definition of done may be bigger than just the functionality of the feature. It might be 3 or 4 features and sufficient enablers to ensure that that feature can go out the door without further delay. And so it's a matter of sequencing in the enablers and ensuring that there's enough capacity dedicated to them so that they can also be done, because if you can't release the feature without the enablers, guess what? Those enablers have high priority. So make sure that that is part of your definition of done.
I think that is a very thorough answer. We have no other questions on the table right now.
Okay.
I see something in the chat about value stream mapping. There was a question from Fernando. How often does value stream mapping take place, or how often should it take place? Dan, what's your take on that?
I like to do it fairly often, at least once a PI. Especially if a value stream is changing, if it is evolving, if it is being optimized, if we're approaching this from a DevOps optimization perspective, which we kind of are, I would want to revisit the development value stream, the continuous delivery pipeline value stream, and remap it to show any improvements and optimizations that we've made. Have we improved a process? Have we improved the process quality? Have we reduced lead time? Have we reduced the churn of, and reduced the size of our bottlenecks within our pipeline? I would want to be able to visualize that value stream on a regular basis, and it helps us prioritize what optimization we're going to do next. So to me, it's a very important reassessment of our pipeline, and so that we always know what is the most important thing we can do to improve that pipeline at any given time.
I agree. It's a really great practice, right? It's a classic lean practice. It works. So yeah, do it as often as you can. And I think one of the reasons why people don't do it more often is the time it takes to get people into a room, or the practitioners, the subject matter experts, through the entire value stream, right? How do we get representation from all aspects of the value stream? Get people into a room. This can be a multiple day event, right? So with as busy as people are, and with people being remote, how do we coordinate schedules so that we can have a value stream mapping workshop? Wow, this is a huge event, and maybe we can only pull this off once or twice a year, right? And now we're asking to do it at least once a quarter, once a PI. So I think that can be a barrier. But what I'm starting to see is more of an emphasis in getting real-time feedback on the health of your value stream through value stream management platforms. So a lot of folks are now automating their value streams from end to end so that they're getting real-time feedback as product is flowing through their pipelines, right? So now we sort of take that human element away. We no longer need to get into a room and have a conversation about how we think our value streams are performing and try to come up with the right metrics, right? Try to source them, gather them from the right systems and bring them into a workshop. Now there are tools that allow you to get this feedback at this data in real time. So it's almost like you've got a continuous value stream mapping exercise happening in your organization that is always on. It's just a matter of looking at the data. So I'm starting to see that trend.
Yeah, and another approach within SAFE is using the innovation and planning sprint just before you do your inspect and adapt. If you're going to redo or revisit your value stream, if you already have a defined value stream, now you're only working on the deltas to that value stream, but you can take your next challenge for the pipeline into your inspect and adapt and have the entire train help you come up with the solution. You're putting the collective genius of 100 to 200 people to bear on the next problem. And so you can take the result of your value stream effort into your inspect and adapt, whether it's online digitally represented, or if you have to have another value stream mapping session and pull out the old sticky notes. But either way, the IP sprint is the ideal place to do this. But do it before the inspect and adapt ceremony so that you can help solve the problem for the very next optimization that you need to do.
And we have a late breaking question. This might spark some conversation. What are your thoughts on NoOps?
How much time do we have left?
3 minutes.
In 3 minutes or less. NoOps. So NoOps is the idea that you fully automate your IT operations, right? Take the teams out of the loop, and you're now fully automated. Sounds interesting. I guess my thoughts are, I'd personally like to see it. I think it may be aspirational at this point and an interesting target to shoot for, but it seems a little science fiction-y to me at this point.
Mm-hmm. So
not that it can't happen.
Companies that are, yeah, exactly. But of all the companies that are trying it or doing it, or at least approximating it, probably Amazon is the closest, because they only have 2 manual steps in software development, and that's the coding and peer review, and everything else is automated all the way out the door. So if anybody's able to do it, they are, but they're deploying 30,000 times a day or so. So they've been doing that since day one. They were never waterfall. They were always agile. So they have an advantage over a lot of companies.
It's a logical milestone in the evolution of IT, right? As we're accelerating automation, we're automating more things, we're putting the robots in charge, and we're outsourcing, we're going to the cloud, and all of those kinds of things. It makes sense that it's plausible. I just think it's a really, really interesting proposition. Whether we can ever fully achieve NoOps, I'm a little bit skeptical of, right? Can we really take humans out of the mix altogether? At this point, I don't think so, because we still need folks around to manage the value stream and to make decisions and pull the data, have the insights, and direct the strategy. So I think as we automate more and more, we'll see more and more of a convergence toward a NoOps kind of paradigm. But I'm skeptical that we'd ever reach true NoOps, right? That sounds a little bit like Skynet.
Yeah, but Mark, they can do it in Star Wars and
right.
Star Trek. What's the problem here?
Oh, was the question about can we do it in the movies or can we do it in real life?
They built some really big things in Star Wars. I think you can get all the contractors together to build a Death Star or two. I think you can definitely have some automation as part of that process. We are at time. Thank you, everyone, for joining us today. If you have more questions, how can ICON help you? If you've got more questions on where do we go from here, how do we get started? We've got this business challenge or that problem. We just don't know how to scratch that itch. We can help you no matter where you are along in your maturity journey. Please reach out to us. We're happy to talk zeros and ones, and we can bring people like Dan and Mark to bring to bear on some of these sticky problems as well. But I'd like to thank everyone for coming in today. Be sure to check out the webinars page for recordings of the previous 2 webinars, and be sure to join us June 8th for the last step in the continuous delivery pipeline. Thank you very much.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, everyone.
See you next time.
All right.